Okay, hi. So my name is Rory Blyth, and I'm going to be doing a series of screencasts here on Channel 9, all about Windows mobile development, of which this is the first. I haven't figured out exactly how many I'm going to do, but I'm going to do them this week, and I might do as many as 8. I haven't really decided yet. This first one is simply an introduction to Windows mobile development, and it is a level 200 screencast, meaning that I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with Visual Studio and that you have some familiarity with programming, like you know the difference between like a variable and an orange, for example, or something like that. In other words, that you're not coming to this just totally brand new, and that you know never having seen like a computer before. So this is going to be a very simple introduction, and then after this, I'm going to get into some more advanced stuff. We'll be looking at, and not in this session, but in the ones that follow, be looking at internet connected apps. We're going to be looking at data aware apps. Going to look at how to perform data synchronization. We're going to look at new features of Windows Mobile 5.0, and it's going to be neat. Okay, and if you're ever curious, about visiting my blog, the address is on the bottom of every single slide here, of which there are going to be like 4. So the slides are going to be really short, just enough to give you a little bit of info that you need. So first off, to follow along, if you want to do this stuff at home, you're going to need Visual Studio 2005, and you're also going to need to get the Windows Mobile 5.0 Pocket PC SDK. And the address is right there. It's a Shrinkster address. And if you aren't familiar with Shrinkster, it's just an application that takes a URL that's really, really, really long, like 5 pages long, and it makes it really, really, really short, just like you see there. So instead of having to post something that would be really long and complicated for you, you just have to write down shrinkster.com/G8Y. That's simple. And you can also grab the Windows Mobile 5.0 smartphone SDK. Now, you don't have to have both of them, but I happen to like to write applications for Pocket PCs and for smartphones, so I grab both SDKs. With Visual Studio 2005 right out of the box, you can still do smart device development, but you're going to be limited to previous versions of Windows Mobile, so like 2003 second edition, for example. If you really want to do 5.0 stuff, you got to get these SDKs, and 5.0 is definitely where you want to be, so you might as well just follow my advice here and get the SDKs. What you don't need for at least this first session is a device. We're going to be doing everything using the emulators, and in particular the emulator images that ship with the SDKs that I just mentioned. So with that stuff out of the way, we can just get started. So here we are then inside of Visual Studio 2005. It's not like some special company copy of the application. It's just a good old copy of VS 2005. Nothing crazy going on here. I'm going to go to New and then Project. So far, nothing weird happening. And the reason I'm going to mention quite a bit probably throughout this first demo that there's nothing really weird going on. And the reason I say that is that I think that people expect when they're coming to something like a mobile application, which seems like it should be a completely different kind of development, is that in reality, the way we have it set up here, it's almost no different from creating a regular Windows desktop application. The main difference being that you do have fewer controls that you can use, fewer at your disposal, and you have less real estate to work with on the screen. But aside from that, there are really many, many similarities, and you shouldn't have any problem at all going from regular Windows desktop development to Windows Mobile if you've never done it before. So I have some project types here under Visual C#, which is my language of choice, and then Smart Device. And these two project types or I should say these two sections here, are what get installed with the SDKs that I was talking about. So we have Pocket PC and we have Smartphone. I'm going to be working with Pocket PC in this demo, and I just want to create a standard device application. As you can see, I could also create a control library or an empty project if I wanted to, a class library as well, and interestingly enough, I could even create a console application. I've never actually tried this because not only do I kind of doubt that the Pocket PCs that I'm using ship with an actual working console, but I really cannot imagine myself trying to interact with the console using the stylus or like one of those built-in thumb pads or something like that. I think it would go completely crazy. Some other options we have here. You see we have the device application repeated over here, along with the other project types, and with the 1.0 in parentheses. All these mean is that these would be created against the .NET Compact Framework version 1.0. So when you're writing a Windows mobile application, you're going to be writing it against a special version of the .NET Framework called the .NET Compact Framework, which is a bit smaller than the standard desktop framework, but it's also missing a lot of things that you don't need from the standard desktop framework, like, for example, ASP.NET. You're not really going to be writing web applications on your phone, for example. So that's not really a big deal. So I'm going to create this device application, and I'm going to call it Channel 9 Simple Demo. I'll hit OK. So nothing really different about that from creating a regular desktop application, except that I happen to use a different project template. And we just wait a moment here for everything to come up. Okay, so as the project is being created here, you have probably noticed that this is not what you're really used to seeing when you create projects, just standard desktop projects. What we have here, instead of a standard Win form, is we have a Windows form that is actually a smart device Windows form. So it's smaller, we have less real estate, and just to give us a slightly more realistic design time experience, we even have this skin here to make it look like we're actually developing for a Pocket PC, which is what we are doing, but it's to help us get a really good feel for what the application is going to look like when we try to run it. Now, I personally don't really like to see the skin while I'm working, especially when I'm doing these demos, because I'm working with some very limited screen real estate here. So I just right-clicked there and selected to remove the skin. If you happen to be working with a Pocket PC device such as an iMate Jazzjar, which operates more often in landscape mode than portrait mode, you can also rotate the form. So here we are in landscape mode from portrait mode. So that's not hard to do at all. But I'm just going to set it back to the standard portrait mode. And a lot of you probably don't know me, but those of you who do know that I have a slight touch of the OCD, and I hate leaving things called Form 1, so I'm going to rename this from Form 1 to Main Form. And that will make me feel better. And then I'm going to click here on my form, now that I've renamed it. I'm going to head over to my Properties window, and I'm going to change the text to Channel 9 Demo 1. Now, the whole point of this is, the point of this demo isn't to really wow you with all the things you can do with a smart device. That's what's going to be happening in the later sessions that I'm going to be posting very soon, if I haven't posted them already. The whole point here is to show you, to the contrary, just how easy it is to put together a simple smart device application, and how to debug it and how to test it without using a device, and also to introduce you to at least a couple concepts that are going to be more and more familiar to you by the time you're through following this series of screencasts, if in fact you do happen to follow it. So I'm going to do what every single developer from the beginning of time has done when introducing a technology, and I'm going to write Hello World. And I'm going to go down here in the toolbox, and this is kind of fun. We get to see what kind of controls are available to us. As you can see, we have a way of providing a binding source here for our application if we want it. We have a button control, of course, although believe it or not, you will not be using these very often, especially if you are in the Windows Mobile 5.0 world. In fact, we're really trying to discourage people from using these, so don't be too tempted to go slapping buttons all over your applications. Data grids, date time pickers, we have scroll bars, the input panel. This is an interesting control. This represents the soft input panel, which is what users can use to enter data into forms on the screen, should they not actually have a thumb keyboard or perhaps an external infrared or Bluetooth operated keyboard. We have a message queuing control, so there's actually a lot of really powerful stuff here. We have a camera control, a notification control, a progress bar. This is really neat. You'll be seeing this in a later demo. We have a web browser control, which means that using the .NET Compact Framework, you can actually create, I should say the .NET Compact Framework version 2.0, since this control is new to that version of the .NET CF. You can create a web browser for a Pocket PC, for a PDA, or for a phone in under 3 minutes. It's kind of mind-boggling. But all I really want is a text box. Very simple. And if you're used to the desktop world, then you're used to having these nice little snap lines. They're here as well in the mobile world, so I can line my controls up all nicely. And I'll just widen this control here so that it's a little nicer looking. I'm going to get rid of the text. Don't want any text in there. And I'm just going to change the name of the text box to Output. Now, I mentioned earlier that we don't really use buttons in the Windows Mobile 5.0 world. or at least we're trying not to use buttons. And the reason is, when you place a button on the form, somebody actually has to use a stylus to tap that button, and that means that the application, no matter what, has suddenly become two-handed. We're trying to keep applications one-handed as much as possible, just so that people don't have to commit 100% of their limbs, should they have both of them, or I should say their upper limbs, to the PDA as they're using it. It's a lot nicer if your users can do everything with one hand. So you're probably thinking, how are they going to do that? And the way that we do that is by using the menu. Okay, the standard design for a Pocket PC application or a smartphone application is going to be to use the menu instead of using standard command buttons. And the menu item on the left here, we will typically use for single action, the action that is going to be the most relevant to the form that we're looking at. And in this case, that is to pop up a hello world message. So we just say hello world. Then over here, on the right side, we'll typically put a traditional menu. Okay, so we'll put in, items like I don't know, canceled, clone, growth. I don't know what people put in their applications. Demagnetize core. That's another possible thing you might see in a mobile application, etc. So we put our standard menu items over here on the right. We have our single action item over here on the left. And in doing this, we make it possible for people to use our applications in a much more single-handed way. And the reason this works, and let's see if I can bring the skin back up and see if the skin actually shows us. Yeah, on all Windows Mobile 5.0 devices, you're going to see these two soft keys here, soft key 1 and soft key 2. And they correspond directly to these two menu items. Okay, so if you can imagine this device being real rather than just a skin, for our reference, we could hold the device with one hand and hit, say, the soft key 1 with a thumb, and thereby activate the Hello World menu option. Okay, so that's the reason we do that. It just makes it easier to do one-handed applications. If we were to use a button, the user would then have to actually pull out the stylus, and well, then the whole world just gets really complicated. Now, in this application, I'm going to double-click here on Hello World, and it just takes us to the event handler for the menu item 1 click, or I should say for the menu item 1. And looking at this form, or looking at the code here, you're seeing that the code isn't really all that much different from what you would expect from a standard desktop application. We're still using the system namespace. Because we're using the .NET Compact Framework version 2.0, we even have access to generics, which I think is really cool. This is something that the mobile team didn't really have to do. So it's nice to see generics in here as well. We see data, we see drawing, we see text, we see using system.windows.forms, or in other words, the namespaces are the same. Okay, and so it's a familiar world. Granted, the devices are completely different, running on totally different hardware than what our desktop applications would be running on, but we don't have to learn a whole lot of new stuff here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say output.text equals hello world. And I like to distinguish myself by doing the grammatically correct version of hello world, both with a period and with a comma between hello and world. So you get, even though this is an age-old demo, this is like a special treat for you here. Now, when we want to debug the thing, all right, it doesn't get very complicated. What we do is we choose a target device. If we have a device that's actually plugged into the machine we're developing on, say via a USB cable or perhaps cradled, then we could select the Pocket PC device itself. However, we're going to be using one of the emulators here, and we have a whole host of options corresponding to the many different types of form factors that are available now for Pocket PC devices. Because we don't just have the standard 240 by 320 screen nowadays. We also have a higher resolution VGA screen that is 480 by 640, and we also have a few square screen devices, such as the Trio 700W. So we let you emulate your application on any one of these different form factors just to see how everything's going to look. In this case, we're going to get by just fine with the standard Windows Mobile 5.0 Pocket PC emulator. So I'll just leave that selected. And before I run the application, I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do this just for fun. I can connect to the device, and we see this little dialog here explaining that the emulator is being loaded. And it can take a moment, but here we go. So now we have the device, and there's that skin again, just like the one that we saw earlier. I can close this dialog now, and then switch back to the emulator. What's really neat here is that with Visual Studio 2003, if you ever did any smart device development, the emulators weren't really so much emulators. They were actually Windows CE images that were running in x86 mode, whereas these emulators aren't just emulating the Windows CE environment. They aren't just providing the Windows CE environment, which is Windows Mobile, but they are also emulating the hardware underneath. So you get a much more faithful emulation experience. And if you've never used a Windows Mobile device, this is really neat because you actually have access to everything here that you would have with a real device. You can use it just like a real device. In fact, if you're really desperate, you could actually just leave the emulator open and carry your laptop around and use this as your PDA if you wanted to. It ships with Solitaire, which is really important. So you can actually play Solitaire right here on the device, just like on the real thing. And of course, that's really distracting. So I'm going to close that. I think that's how we've been selling Windows all these years. It's just Solitaire. If you've never seen what Windows Mobile has to offer, you can use these emulator images just to check out some of the very basic things that typically come with the device, like Word Mobile. So if you want to try writing a document, you can do that, and you can get a feeling for what Word Mobile is like, or if you want to see what Pocket Excel is like, or if you want to see what PowerPoint Mobile is like, you can do that. So you can have a little bit of fun here just poking around. But what we're going to do now is deploy our application to the emulator. So we see that everything's building down here, and hopefully, okay, good, the build was successful. I'd hate to think that I were about to perform an unsuccessful build of a Hello World application. That would be like the most embarrassing thing ever. We see the beach ball over here on the emulator, which is kind of the Windows Mobile equivalent of the Windows Desktop Hourglass, and here is our application. So we'll hit Hello World, and there we go. It pops up right there, just as we would expect. Not complicated. I'm sure that you were able to follow along if you've ever done a Windows Desktop application without any kind of problem. And something interesting to note while we're looking at this is that if I happen to click this X up here in the upper right-hand corner, you'd think, okay, that's going to close down my application. But it doesn't really. You'll notice that we're still debugging. And that's just because of the way Windows Mobile works. If we go to the Settings item here from the Start menu, then click on System, Memory, and then Running Programs, we actually see the Channel 9 demo is still open, as are Word Mobile and Solitaire. The reason is Windows Mobile is trying to do a better job than us of determining how to deal with resources here. The idea being that if we open Solitaire, it must be an application we want to use, and instead of shutting it down completely, Windows Mobile will just keep it kind of in stasis in the background until we need it again, and then it'll bring it to the foreground. And instead of having to wait through startup period again, the application just simply pops up. So that's something to note. Just remember that your application, when you hit that X, doesn't actually close. The only time that your application is going to end if you click on an item up here is if it says OK, or if you specifically handle the event and decide that you want your application to close. Otherwise, it's best to just let Windows Mobile do what Windows Mobile does. So, for example, we see the OK button up here. If I click this, it will actually close that application, that little kind of mini task manager. So that's actually pretty much it. The last thing I'm going to do here, just so that you get to see it, is that we can debug just like normal. This is a question people often have. Can I still debug if I'm going to be doing Windows Mobile development? And the answer, of course, is yes. We're not going to have you developing blindly here. So when I hit Hello World, it's going to take us to that breakpoint. So again, it's just like working with the desktop. Nothing strange there. And there we go. It worked one more time, and that's it. That's the demo. So what you should take away from this is that it's not terribly difficult to create a Windows Mobile application. It's to get started, you're going to want to grab one or both of those SDKs that I mentioned earlier. And finally, at least in the Windows Mobile 5.0 world, you want to avoid putting buttons on the form because we now use the two menu items which correspond to the soft keys that exist on all Windows Mobile 5.0 devices. So thanks for watching this one. And if you have any questions at all, send them along to me, roryb@microsoft.com, and I'll do my best to answer them. I am a pretty busy person, I'll be honest, and of course, going on Channel 9 With a screencast, I should expect like a barrage of email, or at least that's a possibility. So I might really be asking for it here. But if you do have a burning question, go on ahead and ask it, and I'll do my best to get to it in a reasonable amount of time. And with that, hopefully I will see you in the next session, which is going to be dealing with how to develop a Windows mobile application that works with a network scenario. So the web, and also doing manual requests behind the scenes for web resources. Thanks.